Hello, and welcome to Stephoodle. I am, unsurprisingly, Steph, and I have another collab doll for you. I've been following Doll Motion for a long time now, and I love Natalie's work, both her dolls and her stop-motion animation series, Divus. So when she announced on Patreon that there would be a Patreon Divus Collab, I jumped at the chance. The rules were simple. Create a character that could exist within the Divus universe. So, an anthropomorphic character, keeping in mind that the older they are, the more prominent their animal features would be. So to make it a little bit easier on myself, I decided to make a younger character, a 20-year-old university student, to be precise. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to make, so I put up a few polls on my Instagram stories, and let you all vote for the animal and the base. So for the animal, you all voted for the Indian giant squirrel, also known as the Malabar squirrel. And for the base, you all voted for a Wild Hearts crew Kenna. So let's get started. Now that I'm getting her undressed and prepped, I just gotta say, I'm really sad that these dolls never properly made it over to the UK. I really like their bodies and proportions, but those molded on underwear, whew, what a pain. So, because I've seen people struggle with sanding them down, I'm just going to paint them this time. So when she's undressed, I cut off all of her hair as close as I can to her head. Then I put her in a plastic bag and soak her in a cup of boiling water to soften the vinyl of her head until it's nice and squishy and easy to remove. Then I scrape the rest of her hair out from the inside. As it's a newer doll, it doesn't have glue inside the head, it's just the plastic is sort of melted in there. So it's really crunchy and it was very displeasing to remove. I honestly think glue is much more satisfying, even though it can discolor the doll's head. But trust me, it was crunchy, it was gross, I didn't like it. Moving on. Bring on the power tools! Make sure that you're an adult and that you wear the necessary safety equipment, like safety glasses. These even fit over my regular glasses, which is pretty cool. I only need to make one mod here, a hole for her tail. Then, I can start work on her clothing, because now I know where her tail will be so I can work around that. For her tights and shorts, I use the wrapping technique. So I wrap the doll in cling film, or plastic wrap, and then wrap it again in masking tape. Once that's done, then I can draw lines where I want the garment to end and where I want the seam lines to be. Once that's done, I can slice it all off very carefully with an X-Acto knife. Again, be cautious, be an adult. I guess, I don't know, how many times do I need to say be safe? Don't do anything stupid. Please don't do anything stupid. I do a lot of stupid things, don't do what I do. Then I transfer those shapes onto graph paper. It's not super necessary for it to be graph paper, but it kind of helps me measure out everything. So I find it useful. Once the shapes are traced, I add a seam allowance and cut them out. And there's our pattern. This worked perfectly for the tights, but I ended up having to adjust the pattern for the shorts because they were a little too tight. But I added just a little bit to the side seam allowance, and that worked out well. For her t-shirt and her cardigan, I use a slightly different method for making a pattern. What I do here is lay the doll down on my graph paper and mark either side of her neck and her arms so I know where those are, and then I sort of guesstimate the pattern from there. I don't know if there's a better way to put that. What I'm looking for here is a loose-fitting crop top. What I got was definitely loose-fitting, but it was way too cropped and the sleeves were too long. So I adjusted my pattern accordingly, and the second one turned out a lot better. And then I used that newer pattern to help me draft the pattern for her cardigan. So I made it ever so slightly larger. I made the sleeves longer, so I measured out the length using one of her arms. And I made the length fairly long because I wanted it to be longer than her shorts. Her original shoes were a little too small to be worn with tights. However, I guessed that these Harley Quinn DC Superhero Girl shoes would fit really well because they have the same shape feet, but bigger. The DC Superhero Girls have bigger feet. So I tried them on, perfect. So I ended up repainting them black and painting the sock section in shades of gray. Once I was done painting, I sealed them with 2 coats of matte Mod Podge. I made an armature for her tail out of wire and covered it in bandage tape. And I made yarn wefts out of these 3 colors. Indian giant squirrels have some variation in the coloring of their tails. And originally I was going to use a lighter stripe going up the bottom of the tail, and then blue on the back. However, I realized that was a fool's errand and would have taken way longer to plan out because it's so tiny. So I ended up just putting the lightest color on the tip, a ring of red above that, and then did the rest in the blue, and I think it turned out really well. And now we have a posable tail. Then I sanded her body to prep for painting. I actually ended up painting her twice. You see a running theme in my work. I always end up doing a lot of things twice. And that's okay. It's better that you try it once and you get it wrong and then you do it again than if you just keep working at it and you're unhappy with it. Anyway. The first time I used a makeup sponge exclusively, and it just turned out looking really messy and grungy and dirty, and I just was not happy with it. So I wiped her down with an acetone-free nail polish remover. And then I started again. This time I avoided using the darker colors around her joints, and I added a lighter patch on her belly. I really like how it turned out, even though the colors turned out a little bit darker than I originally intended, but meh, it's fine. It's time for the face-up, which was surprisingly easy this time, which is good. Dee Dee. Dee Dee, do you want to come say hello? Dee Dee? Yeah? I got a set of Derwent Intense pencils on sale recently, as well as a white Conte Pastel pencil, and wow, they're so much more pigmented than my favorite pastels. I was able to achieve much more vibrant results in fewer layers. Then I reattached her head and glued in her tail. I ended up deciding to make a wig for her, though I will be gluing it on in the end. I mean, I could just glue the hair and the ears onto the head, but I find making a wig cap gives me a little more wiggle room or margin for error, so just in case I mess up, I don't mess up on the actual doll. It makes sense in my head. To make a wig cap, I first wrap the head in cling film, then I mark where I want the wig cap to be with a Sharpie, because then it's easier for me to see where I want to paint the glue. Then I take a piece of stretchy thin knit fabric and stretch it over the head using small hair elastics. When I use at the base of the neck, I put the second elastic just under where I want the edge of that wig cap to be. Then, using those elastics to help hold it in place, I pull the fabric as tightly as I can so that there's no wrinkles or bumps or anything on the head, as much as I can. There's always probably going to be a few in the back, but you can get it pretty good. Then I coat the fabric in Mod Podge or tacky glue. Yes, Dee Dee. I usually do about 5 coats. Dee Dee. I usually do about 5 coats. Once dry, I take it off the head and then trim it down to the right size. I made her ears out of pieces of felt and yarn wefts. Then I glued them onto the wig cap and pinched them into shape. For her hair, I made yarn wefts out of this peachy colored yarn and glued them onto the wig cap. Originally, I was going to trim her hair into a bob, but I ended up really liking it long. So I just cut her bangs in some wispy side pieces, and then I clipped the rest up into a casual updo. Now let's get her dressed. And here she is. I put another poll up on my Instagram stories for her name, and you all chose Naira Malabar, which I really think suits her. I'm really happy with how she turned out, and I'm really looking forward to the Divus Mega collab that's coming later this year. Have you watched the Divus series? If you haven't, I will leave a link to the playlist in the description down below, and I'll also link it in the end card. Go give it a watch. I have a lot of theories as to what's going on in that series, but I don't want to say them out loud in case I'm right. I hope you liked this video, and if you do, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to stick around and see what else I'm going to be doing in the future, please subscribe, and welcome to the family, I guess. Also there's a bell that you should ring the bell. Ring bells. Bells ringing. Tell you when I update. Whoop-a-doo-boo. Will I ever get the hang of outros? Probably not. Anyway, until next time, which will be actually pretty soon probably. I love you all. Goodbye.